Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Perfect words for us today from Jesus as we celebrate the end of another year of Sunday school, as we look forward to hopefully the beginning of summer at some point, as we honor our high school graduates. We look back on this year that we've come through and we say, what have we learned together? What have these high school graduates learned as they are ready to head off into the world? What will any of us as members of this congregation be able to show the world about who and whose we are? I think most of you know that before I was your pastor, I was a teacher. And so for a dozen years, a big part of what I thought my job was as a teacher was to make myself unnecessary. Well, think about this. The goal of teaching is not to perpetually keep students coming back for information in the classroom, but instead to give students skills to go out into the world and do things on their own. If you teach math, you don't want your student to come back to class year after year after year trying to remember those multiplication tables. No, you want your student to learn them in your math class so that they can go out and use math in their lives. I think in many ways parenting is the same kind of thing, right? We want to make ourselves unnecessary. I say to my boys every once in a while, it's my job to make good decisions for you until you are mature enough to make good decisions for yourself. Right? There's that learning stage, but then there's the follow-through stage. I think this is what Jesus has in mind as he gives this new commandment to his disciples. I'm not going to be with you forever, he says. I'm not going to be walking by your side, showing you what love is all about. We know that the crucifixion, the resurrection, the ascension changes humanity's relationship with Jesus. No longer can disciples just kind of follow Jesus around and think, wow, isn't he a great guy? That's amazing what he's doing. That is true. But now, if people want to think about Jesus, it has to be up to his disciples to live out those teachings that he gave us. The new commandment is about putting into practice the things that we have been taught. Let me tell you one example that I found this week of putting love into practice. On Thursday, I spent my morning volunteering with Habitat for Humanity. They were doing projects all around the Proctor area last week, and our fellowship hall was used as the morning meeting place for that group before they went off into the community to these different work sites. Last week's program was called Aging in Place, and it was all about helping senior citizens with outside home repairs so that they could continue to safely live within their own homes as they age. And so on Thursday morning, we were at the home of a member of this congregation. There was a small but dedicated crew there that day. Besides our member, a few of her children were there, along with a family friend. The Habitat for Humanity project leader was there that day, and so was I. And then there was a couple that came to work that day. Well, we got busy right away in the morning on the project, and so we just had time for small talk as we were doing all these projects. It wasn't until we sat down for lunch where we had a bit more time to get to know one another. And most everybody knew everybody else there in some way or another. But when we got to this couple, they introduced themselves and let us know that they lived in a rural area outside of Moose Lake. Well, we said, oh, well, how do you know this family, or how do you know about this project? And they said, well, they didn't know the family at all. But they believed in the importance of what Habitat for Humanity does, and they wanted to spend a day working on one of these projects. These people had driven up from outside of Moose Lake. They got here by 8 in the morning, and they spent a whole day working on someone's house that they didn't even know. Why? because they wanted to show love. Friends, that's the kind of thing that we need more of in our world. This love that Jesus shows is the kind of love that we can show. Self-sacrificial love. It looks like giving up a day to help someone in need. It looks like giving away your own money with no sense of getting something back. That self-giving love is about doing the right thing for no other reason than knowing that it is the right thing to do. Jesus says, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. We need love, don't we? This world is so divided. It seems like every news story is about some group hating another group, about one side disagreeing with another side, about the few winners and the many losers. Think about the news. A shooting here, a disaster there, crisis after crisis. You can go down the list of the nightly news, right? Border security, abortion rights, healthcare costs, even locally, what streets are going to get repaired this summer? It seems that people are always arguing. That's why we need to be reminded that they'll know that we're Christians by our love. In our reading from Acts today, we're reminded that even the early church argued with one another to figure out who should be in and who should be kept out. Should the followers of Jesus only be Jewish? After all, the Jews were the ones that had God's promises given to them. They were the ones over the years that were looking for the Messiah. But now these Gentiles are believing as well. Should they be allowed in? They don't have any history with us. But now they believe in Jesus. And so Simon Peter struggles with this idea himself. We heard the recounting of his vision. 3 times that sheet was brought down, and God said, if I have made it clean, it is clean. I've told you, Peter means rock, but I think it means blockhead. I know this from personal experience. It took him 3 times to get the message from God. But then he brings that back to the church. He says, God is doing something different, and we need to go along with it. His wise words, if God gave them these gifts, who am I to hinder God? For all of us, it can take a while to get on the right page. But when we remember that Jesus loved, that's when we know what to do. Jesus welcomed everyone. He died and rose again for everyone. In the end of that Acts reading, Peter and the early church did show that they were his disciples because they chose love over exclusion. We've got some graduates who are going out into the world. We do this every year, right? What have you learned growing up in this church, in your families, in this community? And how are you going to show those things to the world around you in your next steps? The world will know that you are a Christian by your love. The Sunday school kids, you've spent a whole year reading all these stories, getting lessons from wonderful teachers. Now you can draw upon those lessons and live them out in your lives. Love like Jesus loved. Every one of us, every person that's here. When you walk out this door today, don't slip on the snow. But when you go out into our community, into the world around us, people will know that you are Christians by your love. That is our call, to love like Jesus loved. Amen.